Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tastemakers. I'm your host, Taran Armstrong, and this is the podcast where we talk about what's going on in the world of TV and film. And with me, as always, it's Grace. How you doing, Grace?
I'm doing well. I'm here. My voice is not so much here. I've been trying to do the Nosferatu vampire voice. That's how I threw out my voice, Darren. Not really.
You will come,
It's pretty good.
Grace.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Apparently he did like voice training for that. And then the only thing they did was amplify it. So I'm excited to talk about
Hmm.
Nosferatu,
Uh,
Complete Unknown, and more today, Darren.
Yes, Nosferatu and Squid Game are kind of the two big talks of the town. So we will be talking about those. And then the other things that are really there's not much else that came out this week,
No.
but there is a decent amount of stuff upcoming. So we can maybe preview some of that. And in the meantime, this is kind of a focused podcast, I think, focused primarily on these two massive releases. Or Squid
We
Game, really the biggest massive release.
We talked about this, I think, last week as we finished the pods. We did not say this on the podcast, but there's a chance that later, at the end of the pod, depending on time, we could get a little spoilery with specifically Nosferatu. I think is the thing that you and I have both watched and have watched all of it. So we could do that at the end if we were so intrigued, Taryn.
Yes, we the idea is percolating. All right, so news wise, there also I didn't really see much this week. I did recently just see that Squid Game actually is the first Netflix show to be #1 in every country.
Oh wow!
So
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
I guess that. I mean, yeah. So I was pretty excited for it to drop all at once on Boxing Day. Not everyone in America celebrates Boxing Day, but Boxing Day, that's the day it dropped, December 26th. I saw some people being like, I don't know that they should have. I think even we were talking about this last week of like, this is one that you were excited to like, you would have been excited to have like devoured slowly, I guess. This is exactly why they drop it all at once. This is the thing that they do better than anybody, which is that you can, if you drop the whole thing at once, people will watch as much of it if it's very good and entertaining, which I've found so far. I've not finished Squid Game season 2, but I've so far found it to be quite good. But this is why they can then tout these numbers to be like, look at how much people watched and loved Squid Game, and that's what they go for in while giving up a little bit of like the prolonged conversation about Squid Game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's effective. I mean, especially the way the season works. I've watched 2 episodes of Squid Game. I did not have a lot of time to.
That's exactly how much I watched. Yeah.
But I mean, I am kind of glad that I have a lot of it, I guess. It released in a specific time. I didn't have a lot of time to watch things, but I also didn't have a lot of other things that I was super interested in watching. So having a bunch of Squid Game to watch was kind of fun because it was sort of like, it's sort of a weird time, the holiday week. And your schedule, at least mine, is very sort of different than it normally might be. And, you're kind of doing different things and treating yourself in some ways, hopefully, but also probably doing a lot of things. And so you get to maybe sort of like be like, oh, you know what, I'm going to indulge and just be able to watch a fun show, Squid Game, whenever I have the chance. And so I thought it was kind of nice.
Yeah, I agree. I do. So the other news about Squid Game is that it got renewed for season 3. They announced that it will be the last season and that it's coming out next year, which is exactly what just happened with another show that I'm struggling to remember the name. Oh, Asila. They announced that it was like season 3 and season 4 got renewed, and it would be the end. A Man on the Inside. No, Man on the Inside. Yeah, Man on the Inside got renewed, and they were like, it's coming back next year. And we're all like, wow, what a surprise that they're going to turn around a show. That's a comedy. Squid Game a little different. And I do wonder, obviously, between seasons 1 and 2 of Squid Game, kind of the only thing you can kind of point to in terms of so did it come out? It came out in 2021, late 2021. Yeah. So 3 years between seasons, which does feel like a long time. There was the writers and actors strike, which although you would think that it being an international show that it wouldn't have mattered that much. I feel like this.
I think it still mattered to some degree because you're still working with actors from different countries and production people from different countries, and I think it had an impact worldwide generally.
So regardless, that's a long time between seasons. That's like, even I feel like in this modern day of television, it feels like that's like about where I'm like, ooh, that's been a long time. Is 3 years. I feel like 2 is reasonable-ish in the new era. But they're saying the new season is coming out next year, which I guess we'll see if that happens. But also this was 2 episodes shorter than season 3. And I do wonder if that there was any sort of accounting in terms of some of the cost savings, and the ability to like get it out in a chunk of time, basically 2 seasons within 2 years, to sort of like shorten what they've done. I'm saying this all without any knowledge of what happens at the end of season 2, but I do think it's quite interesting that there was such a long break between seasons 1 and 2, and that they are rushing to get the next season out and the last season out. I wonder if you have any thoughts on why that might be happening.
Yes. Sorry, I googled Squid Game to confirm that it was out in 2021, and
Yes.
there was a card that appeared on the bottom of my screen that I clicked, and it started playing the Squid Game.
Just like the music.
What is it called? The red light, green light thing.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah. So I just think this
that's big time.
Yeah, that's right. That's on the Google page. If you do that,
that's on the Google page.
Oh, I see. So what did you Google? Squid Game?
Just Squid Game.
Squid Game, and then you can get it on your.
The
Google.
card is just hovering at the bottom.
I see it, and then it plays it.
Yeah,
that would be very distracting, Taran. I can see that would be very distracting. Yeah.
So okay, about Squid Game.
Yes.
I've seen. I last week I talked about how I felt like expectations are going to be fairly high. I think that the way that it has infiltrated the culture of, I guess, many of the countries that it has aired in, is likely going to mean that like an oversaturation could mean sort of turning on the show. So from what I've seen, I think reception is pretty good, like surprisingly good. I have not seen the kind of overwhelming backlash that I think could exist if there were like little flaws to pick at. I think generally the response has been, this is a really good follow-up to season 1. I haven't even heard a lot of discussion about like, season 1 was better. It's mostly just like, no, this was really good. This was really fun. There has been a little bit of divisiveness, I think, primarily focused around the back half of the season, and primarily, I think, the ending, which, in as little spoilers away as possible, because I don't even know what it is, I've just heard is not very satisfying, because it very clearly is like not the final, it's not at the conclusion to the arc, that there is another season coming, and that you kind of have to wait for that season to get a proper ending. So with that in mind, I'm trying to go in with expectations of, okay, I know that's coming, so I'm not going to be disappointed by it, hopefully. And with that, I hope I really like the season. I've watched the first 2 episodes, and I really enjoyed both of them. Like, I thought they were very fun. And I wasn't expecting that because, again, like the smallest of spoilers, but like they really take their time. We've talked about how, the promo images and, trailers and such indicate that they are going back to the Squid Game at some point, but they take their time doing that. And I've been kind of like, let's get back to Squid Game, but it's been fun in the meantime. And so I've really liked it.
Yeah, the thing about them taking their time is certainly true. I'm surprised by how much time we spend not in Squid Game thus far, which I actually feel like there's 2 things happening in my brain. One is I'm like appreciating the temptation, like resisting the temptation not to just like episode 1 starts and we are in Squid Game again. Like I actually really did like that. I think the first episodes are really, really good. But part of me also says like, you only have 7 episodes. And so like, how are we going to fit this much in? Which also excites me. I think there's a way in which my head is starting to think about like what they're going to do. I already think in the first two episodes, they introduce a couple of like there's kind of like one game. Both of them are like again the same thing as season one of like one of them is like a children's game with a little bit of a twist I hadn't seen, and that was really interesting in terms of I think for us as reality show fans, there is a little bit of like, ooh, how would you approach this game? What's the strategy behind this? I think those both happen in episode one. The other one is not a children's it's very much not a children's game, but it's very fun and very tense to watch. So yeah, no surprise to me that it is that's very cool. It's the number one show in every country that Netflix is available in. Yeah. I have two other news stories for you, Taran, that I wanted to drop on you. One, I'll start with this one. I think it's very interesting. Apple TV, which has, I think, one of the better catalogs of television amongst streamers, but very few people actually watch Apple TV Plus. If you look at the number of subscribers for Apple TV, very few people actually have that platform. Apple TV is trying something this upcoming weekend, Taran. All of their Apple TV originals will be free to watch without a subscription this weekend on January 4th and January 5th. So that is Severance, that is Ted Lasso, that's Presumed Innocent, that's Silo. All of their original programming is free to watch this upcoming weekend. If you have not watched anything on Apple TV, this would actually be a good suggestion for us, Taran, is what is the thing you would most point people to go watch? My obvious one is Severance. And this clearly feels like a Severance play of making sure people watch season one before season two comes back in a few weeks. But
yeah, that's very interesting. I think
share you the article that I found this on.
Like the method with which things are free is interesting to me. Like, is it the kind of thing where you have to like download the app, make an account, put in your credit card information, and if you don't cancel by the end of the weekend, you're paying? Like,
supposedly, to stream for free, simply open the Apple TV app on a supported platform between January 4th and January 5th, and you'll be able to view Apple TV originals with no subscription required. That is the language that is being used.
That's pretty nice. I think that's pretty fun.
Yeah.
A weekend is enough time if you're dedicated to binge like a whole show, or start one and then feel like I really want to finish it.
It's smart. It is pretty. There's like obviously been like free trials, but this like thing of like just come and watch and then watch. There's a Dropout does this a little bit where they'll put stuff on YouTube that I feel like is an effective strategy. If they'll put like the first episode of a new season of something on YouTube to then be like, and if you want to watch the rest, you can come pay for the subscription service. So yeah. Severance would be the one I would watch. I would recommend watching. Ted Lasso is one I know people really like. Bad Sisters. Sorry, the first season maybe more than season two, but yeah, all things that would be available for you to watch.
Yeah, and Silo's on there if you're interested in that. Shrinking is another show that people are very into.
Presumed Innocent, I would recommend too. That's what I would. But
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good stuff there. Really, it's hard to miss, quite honestly. If you just shoot for whatever genre you're interested in, you're probably going to land somewhere you like. So it has good shows. It's a good place.
Yeah. All right, my other news story, Taran, is why the hell is HBO, the Warner Brothers is going to not renew Sesame Street? If you've heard that, what?
Oh no, I hadn't heard that.
Is this just a me complaining about things we used to have in the past that we won't have anymore, and it's actually okay that a show that has over 5,000 episodes it might end? Is that okay, or should I actually deeply care that Sesame Street gets renewed?
I thought Sesame Street was like PBS.
It got acquired at some point. It became a Warner Brothers property, which is why they had like, do you remember when there was like a Game of Thrones episode? Not that you remember, like not that you like watch it religiously. I don't even watch it.
Yeah, I remember the time that they had Grover. Listen, it crosses over pretty well. There's some good name crossovers.
There's some good name crossovers, but yeah, I mean, this is bad PR for David Zaslav, I think, unless he just like
what already has good PR for David Zaslav.
That's true. Yeah, apparently the 55th season, which is debuting on Max on January 16th, will be the last one produced under the agreement. Under this new, it's been on HBO for about 10 years. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't seem like they're doing much with it.
Well, I mean, to be fair, like I don't feel like there's some of my nieces have had like a smidge of like Sesame Street love. There's a little bit of Elmo love, but for the most part, I feel like they do tend to watch. Like Max isn't a very good platform to have your kids content on. Like I do feel like if you were like unfortunately on Netflix, like my nieces and watch a lot of stuff on Netflix. YouTube obviously is where they watch a lot of stuff. But yeah, Sesame Street might be coming to an end supposedly. So
It is
we'll see.
wild to
You
me.
would think
Like,
that someone would acquire it, right? You would think that someone would
also,
acquire it.
just like children's content is big business. Like,
That's true.
you know, kids just watch stuff on repeat constantly. Like, you'd think that having such a juggernaut in the children's entertainment space that you'd care more about like trying to make it work than just dumping it. But listen, Zaslav does what Zaslav does. So
Well, I just think that like HBO is such um a weird place to like Warner Brothers
surely
is
somebody else would be
actively
interested in buying it.
I think that will happen. Like
Okay.
PBS, I think the same thing between PBS and then like PBS was too small to be able to probably create the show at the quality. I mean, it can't be that expensive to make, but also it's like a very valuable brand. And it can't look shoddy. Like it has to look good. So I presume just like that was like not sustainable for PBS. HBO bought it. Warner Brothers doesn't really make sense to me as a place that would like continue to house Sesame Street. But then you would think like it is kind of interesting, like who else might acquire, like where else might Sesame Street live? So yeah, we'll see. We shall see.
We'll see.
Disney seems to make some sense. They already own a lot of Muppets content. I feel like Disney getting Sesame Street and it being on Disney Plus makes a ton of sense. But
Yeah,
we'll
I
see.
agree. That does make a ton of sense.
Yeah.
All right. Before we talk about Nosferatu, I do want to catch up. I did watch because it was plastered all over Amazon Prime Video. Red One.
Oh, okay. Yes, I've still not watched Red One, so
Which I
tell
heard
me.
actually, like, you know, despite
Yeah,
the colossal budget, ended up performing decently in the box office and has done very well on Amazon. And I get why. Like, it's Christmas time. It was there. And I was like, okay, here's a dumb Christmas movie to throw up on my screen while I do other things,
yeah,
which is exactly what it was.
yeah.
And here's what I'll say about Red One. This is the movie, if you don't remember, it's the Rock,
Mhm.
Chris Evans, J.K. Simmons,
Jacked J.K.
and
Simmons. Mhm.
yeah, as Santa. And it was like the most expensive Christmas movie ever made. It was like a $250 million or something. It's like an action Christmas movie. And rumors abounded of
What
The
what
Rock being weird on set.
what's the premise like Santa's bodyguards? What is the premise? What is like
The
Santa's
premise
like
is that Jacked Santa, aka J.K. Simmons, has his head bodyguard is The Rock,
yeah,
who is in the Elf Force, ELF,
of course.
uh,
Mhm.
and he gets kidnapped,
Mhm.
and The Rock is forced to work with low life like tracker Chris Evans, who is on the naughty list, to find him and recover Santa to save Christmas.
That's pleasant enough.
It's a very pleasant
Yeah.
premise.
Mhm.
And I found in the first, I would say, 45 minutes to hour of the movie, I was having a surprisingly good time. I was like, this is just kind of fun. I don't know why people were all up in arms about this movie. It's pretty good. Um, it did feel like it was way too long. It's basically the second half of the movie. I completely clocked out. It felt like it was 3 hours. I looked at the runtime after I finished watching, and I genuinely and still didn't believe it.
Did you say you looked at the runtime after you watched the movie?
Yeah, like the movie was finishing, and I looked at how long the movie was.
You don't Oh, yeah, wait, hold on. You don't look at the runtime of movies before you watch a movie?
Well, sometimes I do, but a lot of times I just throw them on.
That's wild to me, dude.
Well, you have to understand for something like Red One,
No, it's okay.
I wasn't I
Yeah.
wasn't planning to sit there and watch the whole thing
Yeah.
necessarily.
Yeah,
So
okay.
like if I needed to, I would just get up and pause it and come back to it. It was just a thing to throw on. But I also like, in general, I like not seeing how long the movie is because
Oh
then I'll have
no.
expectations.
No, I'm a chronic time checker. I gotta know how long the movie is before I go see it. I gotta know when I'm watching it how far into the movie we are. I gotta know.
No, no.
I'm
If I'm
constantly being like, this feels like it's gonna be the last scene because we only have like 20 minutes left, but that's probably like 8 minutes of the credits. Like it's bad, Taran. I actually very much wish I could do what you're saying, but I can't. Yeah.
I only check the runtime during the movie if I'm not liking the movie. I'm like, how much of this do I have left? If I'm liking the movie, checking the runtime will only like lessen my experience generally because I'm just like, okay, if there's 30 minutes left in this movie, that means this is what's going to happen in the plot to extend it to 30 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, or like, oh, there's only 20 minutes left. I guess this is the ending. And most of the time you can figure that out anyway. But like, yeah, it really makes me think about it in a way that I don't want to. But anyway, apparently the runtime is only 2 hours for Red One. I
Oh,
I think there's a like Doctor Who timey wimey bigger on the inside thing going on because it felt like it was 3.5 with how long the second half of this movie was and how boring it was. But still perfectly fine to throw on. There were some fun moments and it's pretty silly.
so this is a thing. So I'm going to say something that's going to sound so hypocritical because I do this a lot, which is like, what I'm going to say is, who cares how much money it costs to make? Like actually, who cares? Like, it's not my money. It doesn't really matter. It's only interesting to me in the sense of like, for me, it's mostly interesting of whether or not these movies, like I look at box office more in terms of whether or not they will continue to make movies like that one or within that thing. But actually, in terms of like whether it costs a lot of money, it doesn't really matter. And I do feel like there was a little bit of a misread in terms of like how much this movie cost to make. Is it probably too much money for a Christmas movie? Like maybe. But the other thing is, this is not a singular year play. And there's two things that happen. One is movies that go to the theater. There is such a hyper fixation on how much money it made at the box office, which I obviously do care about as well. But this movie was not going to go to movies. And the reason why it got put in movie theaters is, one, because it could make a little bit of extra money by being in theaters, but also there is a new thing happening where you almost have to have a somewhat interesting theatrical run to then be a streamer hit. It's very rare to have a hit movie that was only available on streaming. I can basically only think of a few, and I think that like some people might be listening to this. I think if you're listening to our podcast, you probably are more like in tune with the movies that came out than not. But like if I asked my dad about like the movie Carry On, Rebel Ridge, what else only came out on stream? Like there's not that many that I can feel like those were giant movies. But there are movies that do, even if you don't really do well in theaters, having the marketing attached to a theatrical release, like seeing it when you go to look at what movies are playing, or if you walk by a movie theater and you see the posters, that does mean something to then be a streamer, like a success on video on demand or on streaming.
Well,
So
part of why it
yeah,
part of the appeal, I think, to watching it, even for me, was like, oh, this is a movie that was in theaters recently that I could have gone and seen, but didn't
right,
want to. That was too much of an effort. But I can
right,
see it right now.
right, right.
I can cheat and watch
Yeah,
it at home.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, 100%. So that happens. This movie is also a multi-year Christmas movie, Christmas time play. Of it's not just about how well it does on streaming this year. It's about how well it does next year and the year after that, until eventually there's probably another Red One that they'll make, and they'll do it all over again. But then you're doubling down. There's also the thing of like like the things that I saw in Letterbox is like a weird example, but like every time a new movie, a sequel comes out, I see the first movie chart on my what people are watching list. So, not the best example, but like Mufasa just came out. That original Lion King probably got a bump in number of people watching it before this next one. So I think that it's a very long term play for a company that has a bunch of money in Amazon. That can spend this type of money on a thing that's like, hopefully for them, a lasting Christmas franchise that there will be some kids who in like 15 years won't care about Home Alone, but will watch Red One every Christmas. So yeah.
You did remind me, talking about like who cares how much it costs. I did see an article about Terrifier 3,
Yeah.
which is being claimed to be the world's most profitable film
Saw that.
of 2024. It earned 45 times its budget. So Terrifier 3 cared. By the way, I tried to find that article very quickly while you were talking, and I found a Reddit thread with a link to a Twitter post with a screenshot of the article headline.
That's
That was
hilarious. That's the
what I
closest you
was
could
able to
get.
find.
Yeah.
Very annoying.
They're gonna make a million more Terrifiers. Yeah, and even if he makes more money for each one, like if the cost goes up, like the whole point is that it can't be like, millions of dollars that they make this film. So they're just gonna keep churning them out. We're gonna be in like 10 years time. We're gonna have like Terrifier 11. Yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of terrifying things, we both watched Nosferatu.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, I
I
did
saw
go
it on
see it.
Christmas. And it's the latest Robert Eggers film.
Yeah.
Who did The Witch, The
Lighthouse,
and The
Northman. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I liked a lot, but
I did too. I think Northman is my favorite of his movies.
I like The Witch, but
Yeah, I wasn't into The Witch as much as most people, but I did like The Witch more than The Lighthouse, which I really didn't particularly care for. Nosferatu, though, very good. I thought it was very good.
Yeah.
So, a little bit of history. We talked about this a little bit last week, but Nosferatu is originally a film from 1922, a German film that was an adaptation of
Dracula,
Dracula, the
Bram
original Bram
Dracula.
Stoker's Dracula, which was written in the late 1800s, like 1890 something. And it was an unofficial adaptation, we might say. The German producer who created the production company wanted to adapt Dracula, but did not actually get the rights. Couldn't afford them, didn't want to, whatever the case may be. And so they just changed the names of the characters. So like Dracula became Nosferatu, and so on and so forth. Most of the characters are still in the story. They did change the story around it in some interesting ways that if we talk about maybe spoilers, we can get into. But it's basically the first and one of the more loyal adaptations. But the widow of Bram Stoker actually sued the production company and got them to agree to destroy all copies of the film, which they did. But there was, by lore, one remaining version in America, and that one lived on. And so Nosferatu remains a cult classic. So it's this version of Dracula that Eggers decided to adapt, remake, and I definitely felt like this was an homage to silent film making, as well as the vampire myth and the original Nosferatu, with some Dracula in there for sure as well. And visually, as you might expect, I thought it was incredible. Very, very good. I've seen a lot of debate, Grace, on one of the visuals, which is how do you feel about the titular character and any facial hair he may or may not have?
Yeah. So one of the things that Eggers did in this film, if you hear him talk about this, is that he tried to be extremely faithful to vampire lore of the time, and actually not just vampire lore, but like history of the time.
Mhm.
So he's talking about like Orlok being like Count Orlok or whoever being a baron at this time period, and is like, if you look at any picture of any person with any sort of nobility from this period and this time in this area, they have a mustache. So this guy has a mustache. I'm okay with it. I kind of like it. I think that I think that there is a thing to me about vampire stuff where I really do like to see how people take their interpretation of like of vampires. This to me, I think I've heard him say this, that this version of a vampire is much more zombie like actually than a vampire. There's this thing of like there's this idea of like the Dracula that like if you picture in your mind Dracula is a very like attractive man, an unaging man. He's taking this idea of like what if a person lived forever to be like the most like zombie-ish version of that, of like what if they are just like they're undead. I really like it. I really like the aesthetic choice. I mean, that's the thing for me that Eggers has over anything is his aesthetic choices, the way that the shots look, the sound, the vibe, the feeling of the film is stronger than for my money anything else. I think he's really buoyed by having really great performers as well. I do see like if people critique this movie, I think that like there are definitely some pacing stuff. I actually think like in the effort to be as faithful to the original movie, I think it's like that, bro, that was a silent film. like you're okay. You're fine to like mix it up a little bit. But for the most part, I really like it. This is another film that I rated extremely high. I think I gave it 4.5 out of 5. That I feel like totally rides and is totally buoyed by vibes, feeling, look, weirdness. This is a very weird film. I liked it a lot, Taran.
I do too. I feel like, and this is probably true of most all Eggers films, not for everyone. I think like you almost have to be specifically interested in the vibe and aesthetic, and even then it might not land for you. I think it is landing well for a lot of people, so I don't want to say it's like niche, but I can definitely understand if you came into this, if you came out of this movie feeling like either that was long and kind of boring, or that was a little over the top and silly. There were some people in my theater who were like laughing a lot in inappropriate to laugh moments.
There's a lot of tongue acting in this movie.
Yes, well, it rides that line, and that's what I mean when I talk about like it being sort of an homage to silent filmmaking, because not only is it very faithful to the original silent film in terms of its pacing and the structure of it and the actual events, with just some slight changes, but also to me it felt like the acting also felt very reminiscent of silent film, where it was very, very like over the top, which is not only reminiscent of silent film, but also like any sort of remakes of Nosferatu. Werner Herzog did a version in like 77 that also had a much more understated acting in some areas, but the Renfield character, who I don't remember his name in Nosferatu, always is like extremely over the top in these sort of adaptations. But in general, the acting is definitely like very, very out there, and the visuals for Count Orlok, or Baron Orlok, perhaps, is very striking, and it really just goes for it. And if you're not able or willing to sort of go along with the ride, I could easily see you being able to, or being unable to, like be going into it and instead being left on the outside being like, what? Like, this is weird, this is silly. But man, it's, if it fits for you, it's a good time and very beautiful filmmaking.
It's visually so cool. I really like the weirdness. Like that's what I feel like I'm the most drawn to Eggers for. It's like, oh, I know it's going to be a little weird. So I quite enjoyed it. Yeah, I think it's I had a very fun time. I don't know that. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't know that everybody walked out of that movie being like, how fun.
I heard people laughing. There was like an older couple that as I was walking out of the theater, the like husband perhaps was waiting outside for the wife who was walking out, and I overheard just very briefly what they were saying, and she was like, I loved it, and he was like, I know. So immediately I was able to get the sense of like, a little bit of a divided household in terms of that one.
That's amazing. I thought Skarsgård as like is really really good. I think Defoe
Mhm.
probably to me probably steals the show in terms of like he's just always very good. But I think the whole crew here of like Nicholas Hoult as Hutter, Lily Rose Depp as Ellen, and Aaron Taylor Johnson and Emma Corrin as the like husband and wife duo. I thought were very very good. It's a very well performed movie, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about some of the things coming up.
Well,
Right?
I do have one thing that I saw that I just want to give the record, which I did go
Okay.
see A Complete Unknown, which is the Bob Dylan, Timothy Chalamet movie, and I liked it a lot. I saw it after Nosferatu. I do feel like if you are a bit sick and tired of the musical biopic, I don't think you need to go see this. I think you can skip it. If you're a Bob Dylan fan, I think this is worth checking out. Like if you're not a Bob Dylan fan and think you might be interested in the Bob Dylan story, I would also encourage you to check this out. I think Timothy Chalamet is quite excellent in this and has become, I think, the front runner to win Best Actor potentially. He spent a long time trying to become Bob Dylan. This is a movie that was supposed to come out before COVID, before 2020. I was going to set and film and got delayed, and then Dune happened, and there's a bunch of delays. There's a very famous like viral video of Chalamet performing Bob Dylan songs as Bob Dylan while in the Paul Atreides outfit from Dune as he was performing. He's been a long time, and I heard something that someone said. I wonder if this was a movie that actually uniquely benefited from a delay, because this is a movie where all of the singing you see happened on set. All of the performances, the musical performances, people are playing the guitar, the harmonica, that sort of thing. And it all was recorded live on set. And I feel like this movie is actually like mostly just people doing that stuff in a way that is quite unique, I think, in terms of these type of movies where often like the actor might not be able to then perform the role that they're playing. But I feel like because it's so good, it does feel like they left a lot of it in. I really like it. I think there's like the love triangle. There's a love triangle piece of this that like doesn't totally work for me, but the scenes where it does work are some of the best scenes I've seen. They're very memorable and will stick out to me. I really, really loved Complete Unknown. I liked it more than Nosferatu, which kind of says something. I don't think everybody will agree with that, and I don't think everybody will love this movie, but I really, really liked it. So I would encourage people to check out A Complete Unknown if that sounds of any interest to you. So yeah,
It does seem like the response has been pretty positive so far. So I'm going to see this one at some point for sure. But okay.
Yeah.
There's actually a lot of new shows coming, a lot of premieres, so to speak. I would say no big ones, no like big thing that's happening, but a lot of like, okay, this one's coming. I would say probably the biggest, or at least the most acclaimed premiere coming up in the next week. SAS Rogue Heroes season 2 is going to be starting. This is a show about the dramatized account of how the world's greatest special forces unit, the SAS, was formed under extraordinary circumstances in the darkest days of World War II. People really like this show. I watched one episode of it and decided it wasn't for me. But I also thought that the other like war movie about the planes that like Spielberg and Tom Hanks or whatever produced, I also wasn't a fan of that one. And people love that one too.
the end of
So
Masters of the Air.
yeah, Master of
Are
the
you?
Air.
Yeah.
Couldn't get into that one either, but people really like this one. If you liked Masters of the Air, you might like this one because I think it's honestly I have trouble figuring out the difference between the two sometimes because I didn't watch much of either of them. But season 2 is coming and people really like it, so maybe check this one out if you like that kind of like, oh, it's World War II and the bros got to get to war sort of thing.
It has a good cast. It
A very
has
good cast.
Jack O'Connell, Connor Swindells, Donald Finn, who's from
Alfie Allen.
Alfie Allen, Dominic West, Tom Glenn Carney from House of the Dragon, played Aegon. It's got a good cast. Yeah.
Yeah. I wish I liked it. Then there's some other stuff. I think the next most acclaimed one is probably going to be Black Snow, which I have not watched any of. But it does star our favorite wild-eyed actor, Travis Fimmel.
Love him.
This is a show about a murder that shocked a small town. The case was never solved, and new evidence comes to the trail to put a cold case detective on the trail of the killer. And I assume that Travis Fimmel is said cold case detective. So if you've ever wanted to see Travis Fimmel as a detective, this is probably the show for you. It's an Australian show. So
I didn't know I did, but maybe I do. I probably
know
do
I
want
was
to see
kind of
Travis
interested.
Fimmel. If you,
Also,
I feel like I haven't seen him be Australian in anything.
Right. I haven't seen him be Australian or normal. Is he going to be normal in the show? Probably not, but who knows?
Yeah.
We'll
see.
Then a few other season two something. This is not a season two. Or maybe it is. Yes, it is. There's a show called Grimsburg, starring John Hamm. It's an animated show on Fox. Yeah.
This was in addition to their like Sunday Night American what is it, Animation Domination or whatever. This is a show that I can't believe exists, but it does.
Yeah.
Grimsburg.
Doesn't seem to be well regarded, but just putting it on the radar. Speaking of vampires and the occult, Anne Rice's Mayfair Witches is getting its season 2 this week. Also hasn't been super well received, but
No, I podcasted about the whole thing, Taran. It's pretty terrible. The problem is that it's based off book IP that people really love, and so there kept being this thing that it was like they would say something and be like, "Oh, that'll be so interesting," but like it was like you could tell that it was like for later. So I guess that's the one thing the show has going for it, I think, in my opinion, is that the stuff that might be coming sounds good, but it was really because then we'd like Philly and I would show up and be like, oh no, that was pretty bad. That was a pretty bad episode of television. Didn't make a lot of sense. They're just kind of like all AMC is kind of in on the Anne Rice universe stuff, along with this, an interview with the vampire. I believe there's another show coming as well. So like they just didn't want to cancel it in vein of like kind of failure to launch on the Anne Rice universe. So
it strikes me as like your typical kind of like young adult feeling.
It feels like it should be on the CW network.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's the vibe I got from literally like the poster. So
and that's not like I think this show could be for there are some people who were like annoyed that we didn't really like it but I think there's also like a group of people who really, really love these books. So it is what it is. Yeah.
New show called Playing Nice, starring James Norton, is going to be airing. I have no idea if this one is going to be good or anything like that, but it is. The tagline is, "What if your child was their child?" Set against a sweeping Cornish landscape, two couples discover that their toddlers were switched at birth in a hospital mix-up, and face a horrifying dilemma. Do they keep their sons they have raised and loved, or reclaim their biological child? So that sounds dramatic.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Then there's another show, another one on Fox called Going Dutch that's going to premiere with starring Dennis Leary and Danny Pudi.
Oh, I'm interested. That dynamic sounds fun. I'm into that. Yeah, I like that.
This is after an especially unfiltered rant and arrogant loudmouth U.S. Army colonel is reassigned to the Netherlands, where he is punished with a command position at the least important army base in the world.
Okay.
That's not a very interesting premise to me.
No, not for Danny Pudi and Dennis Leary, who I do really like both of them and think it'd be very fun to watch them play off each other. So maybe that will be enough, but we shall see. The other thing that happens next week, Taran, on the 6th is Monday Night Raw comes to Netflix, which is something that I am, as a wrestling fan, a little bit intrigued by. I'm most interested to see, like, this is a show that's been on like linear television for 30 plus years, I think more than that, maybe 32 ish, and is gonna have a new life on streaming. So lots of chatter about like certainly not as many people will be watching it as watched Tyson Paul versus no, that's the wrong. I mixed up their names. Mike Tyson and Logan Paul. So they shouldn't have any like streaming issues. The Christmas Day games seemed to hold up just fine, and hear any chatter about buffering issues. But I'm kind of just interested in like this is a move from a streaming platform to have something on their television that is a live event every single week of for the next few years. So I'm a little bit intrigued by this sort of new era for both like Monday Night Raw, but also for Netflix. And supposedly it's coming with ads. So be interesting to see if they're done the same way that it used to be done, where they would like cut from a match and go to an ad, or if they sort of parse it out differently. But there will be ads on Netflix, even if you pay for the non-ad tier. So
that would annoy me.
Yeah, but it's a live event, you know. So I'm the big question is whether or not you get
especially a live event. I don't want ads.
That's interesting. I guess it's different where like at least there is like a time for like timeouts and things in a football game, as opposed to like you could always have something on television for Monday Night Raw. It'd be interesting to see if the replay has ads or not.
You got to let me be able to pay to not see the ads.
So this is the thing though, like the format of a wrestling show for so long has like Monday Night Raw has been with even their pay-per-views, because they've been on Peacock every series, have ads. So it will be interesting to see if they like switch up the format at all. I'm sure I'll be chatting with Matt and Mari about that.
There's a lot of interesting things going on with streaming and sports in general that I am not super knowledgeable about, but I know ratings for like basketball have been very down lately, but they just had a massive viewership for their holiday games, as Grace, I think you alluded to, which were streamed on Netflix.
Sorry, you said basketball, but the NFL did Christmas Days with a halftime show with Beyonce. That's what happened.
That also happened, but I think there was also a basketball thing
on Netflix.
Might have been somewhere.
Maybe there was. Maybe. I don't think so. But the NBA typically their holiday games typically do pretty well. This is kind of the time of year where like it's sort of like a little bit of a lull in a basketball season, because it's like you hit the new year, you start to hit the trade deadline, and then obviously the playoff run, where this is kind of like a couple months into the season. That's like if your team starts to like not be good, it's not super exciting. So anyway,
well, like I said, I'm not very knowledgeable about it, but there's stuff going on there that's interesting. If you're interested in it, you could look into it. Yeah. Okay. One more show. I think The Rig has season 2 starting up. This one seems to star Ian Glenn, who is in Silo.
He's been very good in Silo. He's been very good. Yeah,
I like him in Silo.
Yeah.
It also has Martin Compston, who you may recognize from, or at least I recognize from, what's the show? Line of Duty.
Line of Duty, yeah.
I don't know if I've seen him in anything else, actually. Mayflies, apparently. Vigil. He just gets around these British shows, huh? Anyway, I've heard it's fine.
This has Emily Hampshire, who's from Schitt's Creek. She plays Stevie in Schitt's Creek as well. Yep.
There you go.
Yeah.
And then one final thing is the movie Harbin, which is a South Korean film, I believe, is coming to the US this week. I think I saw that.
Yes.
I've heard good things. It's follows Korean independence activists who launched a daring attack in Harbin against the Japanese to gain their country's independence. So it's a bit of a historical spy action thriller based on true events.
I've heard this is good. This was what I've heard. I'm excited. I think the movie theater near me will be playing it, so I'm excited. There's not much else in the movies this week. I think it's like one of the Vermiglio, which I know nothing about, is the other like wide release. January's a little rough for movies typically. For television, we are getting Severance, so hopefully that will sustain us for a little bit. But yeah.
All right. Well, anything else upcoming? Anything else to talk about, or should we get into some Nosferatu spoilers?
Yeah. No. The only other thing I would say is I'm interested at some point to talk about the Oscar did their short list of all of the things that they shortlist, so we can talk about that in the future. But there's some stuff on there I'm interested to check out. But otherwise, we could spoiler it up with Nosferatu.
Yeah. Well, we are going to talk soon about our top list of the year.
Yeah.
We might just do that next week, perhaps.
I think we should next week. There's not a lot of new television out, and even if it was, we don't need to spend a lot of time on it. So
I will say I think I'm definitely missing movies. And in terms of shows, there are I need to finish Squid Game. But then also I think the main one I'm missing is Penguin, that I need to finish because I think that would probably place. But I feel fairly ready to go for a top end of the year list. And so yeah, stay tuned for that, and then yeah, Oscar stuff coming soon as well. So stay aware of our podcast.
That's right.
All right, let's talk about some Nosferatu spoilers.
Let's do it.
So I think what's interesting about Nosferatu, one of the interesting things about Nosferatu, in comparison to Dracula, is if you watch Nosferatu, and I will be spoiling Dracula as well. It's basically the same thing. But I find it really interesting because they took Dracula, they adapted it, right? In the book Dracula, the main character, Hatfield, Hutter, whatever it is, goes to Dracula's castle and finds, I believe, 3 female vampires who were made vampires by Dracula. That's a bit of a thing. And the friend of the wife character, I should look up their names so that I can do this properly.
It's Harker. So Hutter. It's Harker in the Dracula. It's Hutter in Nosferatu.
Well, I'll go by Nosferatu names because we're talking about Nosferatu. So Hutter and his wife Ellen, and it's Thomas Hutter. So Thomas Hutter, Ellen Hutter. Ellen's friend Anna Harding in Dracula becomes a vampire, and they have to kill her. And then the William Dafoe character is the vampire hunter in Dracula, who has a very famous name, Van Helsing.
Yeah.
So in Dracula, they go and do their mission, and they kill Dracula, the men. They get him, and they save Ellen, the wife.
Yeah.
In Nosferatu in 1922, this changes. The Van Helsing is a doddering old man who is completely ineffectual, and the husband Thomas Hutter needs to be sent away so that the wife Ellen can do her business and save the day by distracting Count Orlok and doing what you saw in this movie. So they're very faithful to that in this film, obviously, with perhaps the Van Helsing equivalent being a bit more relevant this time around. But I find it interesting because it feels like a somewhat progressive take on storytelling. It reminds me of the kinds of like feminist retellings of mythology that you might read. I read one recently where, like, in the original, like, the men go out and they save the women and they do the thing. But in this one, the men going out, they're just distractions. They are useless. They are pushed to the side so that the women can solve the thing. And I think that's interesting for 1922. And the way that Eggers was able to adapt this and make it his own, he definitely pushed in some more well-rounded sort of feminist content, I think, in this film, from my perspective, between Ellen being a much more central character who gets a lot more depth to her and characterization, to like the ways in which she is treated by the other dude, Friedrich, and the doctors, and like, oh, she's just hysterical, drug her, and so on and so forth. So obviously, I think the vampire myth in general has a lot of progressive ideas behind it, in terms of its like sexual allegories and all of that. But I find it interesting the difference between Dracula and Nosferatu and the ways in which Eggers was able to weave some of that in. I think to this movie, I thought was cool.
Yeah, what's funny is I saw some reviews on Letterboxd that were actually talking about how this is like the straightest version of Dracula of like a vampire story, because I feel like for the last little while there's been a very like queer retelling of vampire stories. I feel like Interview with the Vampire is specifically one that has done that, and so it's actually funny to think that I do think this is a very it's a pretty progressive and feminist version of the movie, and yet some people are being like, it should have been gay.
Well, that's funny because the director of the original was gay,
right.
which I don't
maybe
think
some
yeah.
maybe some repression,
Well,
but
and there, yes, I think I think queer's imagery and sort of ideas have been, I think, part of even Dracula from the very beginning. The idea that like a man might be penetrated by
Right.
another man, it was, I think, at the time even something that some people were like, "Whoa, this is transgressive in a lot of ways." In the ways that like sexual politics are thought about.
And what's funny? This movie is like, it's very sexual, but it's not very sexy. Even there was this like, obviously the vampire trope is like biting the neck, and that to me has a much more like a sexual connotation than what they do in this movie, which makes
the glurping sounds of the chest biting were so
but it does make sense. You would go to like where you would presume
Yeah.
the most blood would be, right? Which is so like the biting in this movie is all mostly like at the chest. But yeah, no, it's funny, like listening to Eggers, he's almost somebody that I feel like there's a couple of directors these days who I like. Every time I hear them talk, I'm a little bit like, I kind of maybe I don't want to listen to you, because he talks about how which maybe this is the right way to go about it, but he talks about like how he doesn't plan for these like themes, and he's not like, he kind of just wants to tell the story as he thinks it looks. Not that he doesn't say he wants it to look the coolest, but he's not so much interested. Like he gets asked about like the idea of it being a plague, although he does say originally he was going to have a lot of people masked in this movie, but he chose against that because he felt it was too like, it felt like he was making a commentary on COVID in a way that he didn't want to. So a lot of like when the boat comes, which I really love that scene where like the rats flee off the it's a plague boat. But he talks about like he never talks about themes with his actors, and probably though in this area, like it's pretty obvious in terms of like what Lily Rose Depp has to do in terms of like she is literally like not only being silenced by other people, but she's under the control, and like the and that scene where he does confront her in person, and basically he's saying like, no, you are just like, you are desire, like that's all you are. I thought it was like it's really powerful thematic storytelling, especially in the wake of like women's rights being rolled back in America over the last few years. It's very interesting that like sort of the two central themes of this movie, it's like when you think about like history repeating itself, it is like it's the plague and it's women's like sexualization, and like that very like when this thing was written in the like when it was Nosferatu was created in the 20s, right after like the Spanish flu, and then obviously a time when women's liberation was there was more control over women than there was now, but that does feel extremely relevant to today. But he's been trying to make this for a very long. He's been trying to make this. I think it was going to be his second film was going to be a remake of Nosferatu.
Yeah. I will say this Orlok guy, he talks about like, oh, it must be by her free will. She must choose to be with me. It's like I think he's got a little thing to learn about consent. Well, like being like, I'm going to kill everyone if you don't be with me is not that's not her choosing to be with you, bro.
But that's true. But isn't that's so incel of like they just choose like the wrong man, right? They don't choose, it's like that, it's yeah. I love though. We talked a little bit about his mustache, but I love that. And speaking of the being like extremely faithful, so like the chest, that's where the blood draining comes from. Also, the like literally trying to like using iron stakes to like, the idea was to like the in the lore was to like literally keep you, not to kill you, was to like restrain the vampire. So that's why like stronger iron stakes rather than wooden stakes. Like a lot of this stuff, he did go back and just read a lot of the original like history and the original lore that was written about the time, which I really really love. I think there's between this and the Northmen, the Witch too, but like those early scenes of like Nicholas Holt going and just like living in these communities and then waking up and like nobody around, that stuff was like the vibes are off the chart in this movie. Nicholas Holt being like scared man was perfectly cast. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like of all of the versions I've seen, this is one of those movies where you're just like, just stop. Just don't. What are you doing? Why are you still there? Why are you still there? You're still there. It's one of those things. I feel like this version of the movie probably gave him the most amount of like legitimate reason. Like, okay, here's this creepy dude, but like, I'm just trying to be polite and get my job done. Whereas, like, in most, which is still pretty ridiculous, but like, in pretty much all the other versions, it's just like, here's an actual monster in front of you, but you're not going to react at all, and you're not going to do anything until way later. Well, what was I going to say? I forgot what I was going to say, but I thought that it was the visuals in the castle. That whole sequence was very, very fun. And yeah, good stuff. I liked it.
Yeah. The thing with the spoiler section, that last shot will stick with me. I feel like that is so incredibly well done. It's so weird and gross and mesmerizing, and it's like sad because she's died. It's like a stunning last shot that I will not forget for a very long time.
Yeah, the last shot definitely. Prior to that, the noises, as I mentioned.
Yeah. It is a tough thing in terms of like the other reason why, just to like go back to like the way that he looks, like the back of his head being like decrepit corpse like, the mustache, all of that stuff. I think the reason why it also works for me is there is that piece of horror movies that is like those moments where you don't see the monster but then you do, and I think like even the movements of Orlok in this movie, in terms of being so slow until he's then like in action, right? Until he like then needs to strike, in the way he moves so quickly. Like the body work. I mean, Bill Skarsgård has to be like completely, for me now, on the Rushmore of like portrayal of horror movie villains between this and Pennywise. I think it's undeniable. So when you have that thing of like not wanting to reveal the monster, but we all know, like, we know what a vampire looks like. We know, we've seen like a million vampire movies, And so the idea to make him just slightly different, and for it to be like interesting enough that as we're catching little glimpses of Orlok, and then when we actually do see him, I feel like it's so effective, I think, in that way. The way that the nighttime scenes feel like they are in black and white, even though they're not, like all of that stuff to me, the visual like feast of this movie is the reason why, like, even though I said earlier that I like to Complete Unknown more, I am more likely to go back and rewatch Nosferatu than I am a Complete Unknown. I'm more likely to wait for a Complete Unknown to come on streaming or VOD to watch it again, whereas Nosferatu, I'm ready to go back and sit in the theater and watch the whole thing again. And for me, like the weirdness, especially of the Renfield character, I think in this one is not Knock. Is it Knock? It is Knock.
I think Knock is right, actually.
Yeah, Air Knock. To me, he's one of maybe my favorite performance of like not the main cast. He's my favorite because he's just, the scene of him like naked in the occult circle, him eating the bird, like all of that stuff works so well for me. It's so weird and delightful and gross.
Yeah, I mean, famously, Nosferatu, was sort of known for its visual striking design for the Count Orlok character. And I believe, if I'm recalling correctly, some of this I'm trying to remember, like my film school studies at this point, like over a decade ago. I believe, like at the time, it was a sort of a controversial thing. They showed too much of the character; it wasn't scary, and then also people saying it was too scary of a movie.
Right.
But very famous for its visuals of Count Orlok, and of course the hand movement and the shadow, which they of course recreated. And I thought actually the more effective version of that was the shadow over the entire city. I thought was
Yes,
really, really cool.
I agree.
Like just a really cool visual. And you know, talking about the character design itself, I thought the scariest moment of the entire movie for me was when Nicholas Holt's character goes to like kill him in the coffin, and he just like reaches up and grabs it, and then like stands up, and you know
Yeah,
you really see him for the first time.
yeah,
That was like actually scary to me for a couple of reasons. One is that like he's actually doing the thing that you'd think that anybody would do at that point, which is like, yeah, just kill the dude. Um,
yeah.
which always makes it more scary than when somebody's acting stupid, I think. And then also just like it was just the vibes of that scene, the visuals of seeing the character design properly for the first time, and just like the inevitability of like, yeah, you're screwed. Like you can't get out of here. You're not going to escape. It was really good. There were definitely parts of this that I thought were really, really, really well done.
There's a film newspaper from March of 1922, a German newspaper that says the vampire appeared too corporeal and too brightly lit to appear genuinely scary.
Yeah.
Whereas other people are like, no, he's weird looking and gross, and it's perfect. And actually, the other thing too, in terms of like it does take a very long time, not like too long, but it does take. I think it's like 40 minutes before Holt is in the castle. So and we get all of that other vampire stuff of like with him and like all the stuff at home, and then all of the stuff on the way to Transylvania that I feel like also let's serve that. Like I do feel like it does take us a while to see him, but also like there's so much other stuff going on that it actually doesn't feel like that much time between when we first meet. Like I thought we saw quite a bit of him in that first scene, and it's very quick, which I guess is the same in the 1922 movie, but how quickly basically Holt realizes this is a vampire. Where like when he cuts his finger with the knife, I guess that's the same in that he knows while he's living in the castle he's a vampire, but that he can't really do anything about it. Yeah. Anyway, I said this was a really really fun time at the movie. I saw it with a packed theater as well, which was very fun way to watch. You know those moments where you're watching something on screen and you're like, oh, we're all watching the same weird thing, eh? We're now you guys are as culpable as for watching this as I am. You know, makes me feel better. Yeah.
There was one person that clapped at the end of the movie.
Yeah, we didn't get
And
we didn't get any
I felt for them because they were like,
It's okay.
maybe it was the wife of the guy that was like, I know you loved it.
It was actually a guy. He had a giant mustache. His
Yeah.
was deteriorating. He's like, this was great. This was great.
All right. Anything else, Grace?
No, that's it for me. There's one other, just very quick. If you stuck for the spoiler section, there is one other movie. There is this TV show that is coming out. It's a Colin Farrell movie. It's called a show called Lockerbie: A Search for Truth. That looks quite good. So just gonna add one more thing to people's watch list. But Lockerbie is a movie or a television show. Sorry, it's coming on Peacock
Lockerbie.
on the 2nd. 5-episode limited series inspired by the true story of 259 passengers and crew, along with 11 residents killed when Pan Am Flight 103 exploded over Lockerbie in 1988. Colin Firth plays the spokesperson of the town after losing his daughter in the crash, demanding answers and justice for what happened. This looks to be kind of a historical drama. I'm seeing if I can go check out September 5th, the movie this weekend. I'm into the historical drama. That's why I like to Complete Unknown though too. So yeah, but Colin Firth, you can't go wrong with Colin Firth, I don't think.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week. We'll have our end of the year.
I do have one other thing I would really appreciate. I wrote for Pop Heist. You can follow it on my Blue Sky. I wrote the top 10 queer films of the year. So I counted them down. I did include one film that I really didn't like, and I only included about it because it was the only other time I'd get to write about the film, and it's a very queer film. And so I threw it on there. So it's on there. So it's like kind of like 9 of my favorite films and another film. But I just I had no other. I guess I have the Tastemakers to rant about films I don't like. But yeah, that's over on Pop Heist. I've been writing a bit for them. I wrote about Ben Whishaw and Black Doves over there as well, and hopefully going to do some more stuff over there. Very much appreciate folks checking that out if you can.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, stay tuned. Next week we'll have our best of the year list. And in the meantime, make sure you're subscribed to the We Know Scripted TV feed. Watch us over on YouTube. And stay tuned for the rest of what we'll be doing heading into the new year. Excited for another year of Tastemakers. Thank you all so much for joining us and being with us so far.
Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you all so much for joining us. We will see all of you next time.